Clinic that is in Dallas, as what I mentioned earlier, very centrally located. I wanted to really use this opportunity just to talk a little bit about our clinic, about myself, and about the process. I actually do not have, I didn't have slides to go over this because I felt like it would be much more personal if we just talk and see if you have any questions. We are excited to be here. A little bit about myself. Again, I'm medical director of Fertility Specialist of Texas, and we are involved in terms of making the babies. I often get the question of why I went into fertility, and I have to say that I waited until I was like 40 till we had kids, and the process of having a child changes your life. And I often, it's almost like that. There's not like a pill that you can take that does like what a child does. When you come home, you could be working hard. It's like have all kind of crazy stuff that's going on at work, and you come home and it's like there literally is not a pill that you can take that can do like what a child does, and that's part of what at least what motivates me and what motivates our staff, and hopefully helping y'all build a family. In general, typically our patients, we often Skype to them on the phone initially before we see you, and then patients come in, and I don't have to necessarily go through the process, but I mean in general, you would come in, we would meet, and you would do a semen analysis, and we'd actually free sperm. We do that because one is that then we don't have to worry about that anymore. We can also tell you that day in terms of what your sperm count is, and then the next part is really making embryos. So we have, as you've probably heard, we have like an in-house egg donor program. We also use agencies, and so whether you use our program or whether you use an agency, that the process is really the same in terms of actually of how we screen egg donors. But obviously, once you have seen it, once you've picked out an egg donor, then that's really the first step in terms of actually making a baby. So typically, initially after we see you, we have done a sperm count. We depending on where the egg donor is, we have egg donors that are located in Dallas, that are in Texas, but we also use donors from all over the country. And it really doesn't matter in terms of, it's helpful if they're in Texas, but they don't necessarily have to be there, because we would just have the screening done at another clinic, and then we're the ones that are managing the whole cycle. We're the ones that are making the decision, and then once the donor gets closer to the time and we get the eggs, and we have them come to Dallas and we do the retrieval. So obviously, we do the retrieval, depending on, I don't know whether, and we can talk about this later, whether you're planning on doing like split insemination, whether you use sperm from both of y'all to inseminate the eggs, let the eggs grow. We do a lot of, genetic testing. So typically, if you're, we biopsy the embryos on day 5 or day 6, and then like a week later, we get a report that basically says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we can tell you if the embryos are genetically normal or not, as well as the sex. And then obviously the third part is selecting the surrogate. We work with a lot of different surrogacy agencies, both in Texas and and outside of Texas, but that's very different than obviously picking out a donor. It still is very, I have to say, like amazing to me when I come to like a conference like this and people are like, surrogacy, like in Texas, most of the time certainly for our international couples, usually like the surrogate itself will like Skype the transfer while you're doing it, and I can talk to you right before we do the transfer. We obviously send you a picture of the embryo or embryos, and then do the transfer, and then 10 days later, they do the pregnancy test, and then we repeat it after a week, and then do an ultrasound. But it's very, I know it sounds a lot. I know you come to these conferences, sometimes you're like, how does anyone ever get pregnant? when you think of everything that's involved, and it can seem very overwhelming, but it's actually, when you break things down and their components, that it works, and it's exciting, and it's life-changing. So that's like a general overview. If y'all have any specific questions, I'm certainly, any topic that you want to ask about, I'm certainly open to answering any questions specifically about the process.
I've read that for the semen analysis, that the agencies will normally obviously do that. That's part of the procedures. But the question is, I've also read that it's actually a good idea for us to go to our home doctor and do that beforehand as well.
So it's a good idea. It's probably safer to do that, to go to your doctor just to make sure that there's not really any issues. But I can say that it's, assuming you're not taking like testosterone, and you don't have like a lot of medical problems, that, it's very rare that you have an intended, intended parent that you can't use their sperm. I think one thing that I think that's useful to keep in mind is that because of the fact that you're coming to a conference, and because of the fact you're going to a fertility doctor, it's like everything is like magnified, and it's almost like that that there's a tendency to I can certainly understand how that would be a concern, but I mean, in general, it's really unusual for there to be an issue with the male that makes it where you can't, where they can't use their sperm. So yes, it's nice to have that security, but obviously we repeat the sperm count when you're there, and it's like that. And I don't know, certainly if in my experience, it's rare to talk to someone where it's like they went there and and there's no sperm, or they didn't move, or things like that. Because it's like that. It's basically just a matter. I mean, you don't have really any issues with fertility. It's a matter of having a house, so to speak, for pregnancy, and making embryos and transferring in a surrogate.
And we met a lot of couples that they've done this really complicated process where they've wanted 2 children.
Mm-hmm.
So what they've done is they each fertilized an egg,
right,
and both eggs were implanted.
Right.
Sometimes both took, and then they ended up in twins. Other times just one took. So is that still taking place? Because we've heard during this weekend that a lot of places are not doing that. Well,
so the answer is that yes, it's still taking place. Now there's a big push to. I know from let's say from a financial perspective, that there's a push to transfer 2 embryos, because you're spending a lot for the surrogate and the testing and all the other associated costs that go into that. But at the same time, when you transfer 2, first thing is one baby is life-changing, and when you transfer 2 embryos, that certainly in our program there's over 50% of the time are there twins, and that when you have twins, there's more complications. And so if you have a surrogate that delivers at 24 weeks, and the baby's in the NICU and has bleeding in their brain and things like that, that it's really it's a very traumatic experience, and so it's not the best circumstance. So it's certainly much safer to transfer a single embryo. If you ask me, do we absolutely insist that you transfer 1 embryo? No, because I think that it's a discussion between us and you, and as long as if you're informed of it, if you know the risk involved, and you're like, I understand that risk, well then it's not like that that we haven't actually talked about it. But I'm saying it's certainly much safer to transfer a single embryo.
Have you worked with surrogacy agencies in Canada?
We have not worked with surrogacy agencies in Canada. I think that that most of, our surrogates for the most part are are surrogates from within the U.S. I would say that one thing that I think is important to look at is that fertility clinic is it's obviously the process of making a pregnancy, but also to making sure that everything is in line. So when you have a baby, that you can pick up the baby and you can go home, and the baby's not going to have an issue with, citizenship and things like that. And so that depends on working with, for example, with a surrogacy agency that is very experienced in doing that and making sure that it's seamless, really. And so, for example, like you mentioned about Canada, I mean, we would obviously, I would want to make sure that I understood exactly, what that process would be, for a surrogate, because I don't know if you're talking about a surrogate that's going to be, it's one thing if it's a Canadian agency, but the surrogate lives in Texas and can deliver in Texas versus someone that's going to be, that's actually going to be delivering in Canada, because the laws basically are depend on where the surrogate delivers. That's basically what governs the process. But again, I'm not like a lawyer. I don't speak to be a lawyer, but I'm saying that, but I do think that we want to, we have a responsibility basically, in terms of almost, representing, making sure that to make sure that it's as seamless as possible, and that you make it happen.
You spoke about egg donation before, that you have that too, that you offer that. Is it the women who do that, is it about anonymously, or is there a big amount of women who say, okay, I want to state a relationship with the intended parents later?
So that's a very good question. Certainly in our program, in terms of the women that are recruited for the program, do it under the advertisement, so to speak, in terms of that it's anonymous. If there was, like, for example, if somebody picked out a donor, and it depends on also on how you want to get to know the donor, so to speak. But certainly, if there was, and Marissa may be able to speak to that, more than me. But if they wanted to, if the donor was open to that, then I think
it'd be a specific request to the donor that if you expressed interest in a particular individual, then we would just contact her directly and ask and inquire what level of contact would be comfortable, and then all of that would be then included in the legal contract between you and the donor, so that it's all expressly agreed to.
And what is your experience? How many women would agree to that?
So it varies. With our program, it's small, so at the moment it's not something that we've kind of gauged with every single one of our applicants, so I couldn't really speak to that. But what I could say is we have absolutely inquired with some of our donors individually when it has been a request, and majority of the time it has been agreed to.
And certainly there are agencies that are more apt to recruit donors that are willing to be open than others,
right.
and so that would be something that
And we are actually moving towards more of a model where we're going to be disclosing that information up front. So in the future, incoming applicants, we will be inquiring that information from the initial application stage.
Okay.
So then that'll be disclosed perhaps even in their profile. So as you're looking, you'll even have that information readily available.
Okay.
And which surrogacy agency are working to work together now?
Well, we work with a lot of different surrogacy agencies. Simple Surrogacy is actually is based in Dallas. They're here, and so we work with them. We work with them a lot, but we work with
Could you suggest us some agency?
Pardon me.
Could you suggest?
Oh,
us
definitely. Right. I mean, I think whether you're talking to us or whether you're talking to anybody, it's like you want to work with a clinic that is used to working with other people, with other egg donor agencies. There are some egg donor agencies, for example, that we're more familiar with and that we're more comfortable with, and certainly there's the same way in terms of surrogacy agencies as well, because the communication is very important.
And inside this folder, I'll bring it to you. It has contact information for Marissa, and you can email her, and then she can, yes,
Yeah.
and she can kind of give you our list of agencies that we have really strong referral relationships with.
But it's important, obviously, because it's like the surrogacy agency is very key, because it's like, someone that's going to have a communication for like a year, basically, with the intended parent. And so you want to make sure that you're comfortable with them, and that that everything is, all the ducks are in a row, so to speak. So it's a seamless process.
I know you're not a surrogacy agency, but it's not. There's never any case where the surrogate is anonymous.
No, that is not
Like
possible.
you always have
Right.
to have a
Yes.
relationship.
Right.
That is not possible,
right.
because you're going to have a open legal contract as well.
Right.
Well, and
Right.
the level of communication that you have or the relationship after the baby is born is completely a discussion between you and her.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
yes, and that's something that you need to determine.
And there's some surrogates who don't want it at all.
Right.
That's correct.
Right.
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 In terms of what? You mean a relationship?
Communication.
Right.
Right.
After
Right.
birth.
Right.
And so something that's definitely you want to talk to your surrogate about, and your spouse, and say, this is kind of what we feel would be most comfortable for us and for our child, and then know going in, and then it's really about that connection
Yeah.
and in finding someone that really connects with you and your lifestyles and, shared goals and things like that. So I just, it varies, but yes, she's basically,
But I would say most of the time there's a relationship, you know what I mean, and that relationship afterwards, and I think that, I certainly can't speak to everybody, but it's like that, it's, like an amazing process, so to speak, and I think this for a child itself to know that, the surrogate's involved and things like that is obviously, to me, makes a lot of
if
sense.
you look inside the folder, and I can't remember if I told you guys this, but one of our nurses is actually a gestational carrier. She's carried twice, and she only carries for same-sex male couples.
Yeah.
And her information is in there, so if you want to pick her brain about how she kind of established the relationships with her parents, I mean, she's a great resource, and she just delivered twins like 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Her name's Ashley, and she's amazing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she posts the parents send her pictures of the babies all the time. And so
Right.
it's just,
Right.
sometimes it can just be a social media relationship.
Right.
Have you had clients from Germany before?
We've had,
Yes.
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 but the thing is, I mean, I can't, because I know that we've had I think it was a single, it was a single guy that within the past year, but I don't remember the specific name. Certainly, we've had patients from
Definitely have a very large international
from England, we had a single guy from Russia, from Moscow, from before, from Italy, from
China.
Israel, from China we see it, but I mean, in terms of logistically, it's really the same, it's the same
And the surrogacy
process.
agency
Yeah.
will navigate the legal process with you in order to establish all the requirements to be able to do any of the visas or what have you to get the baby back home as well.
Yeah, okay.
Any other
Other questions?